Okay, I think we're live. Yay.
Cool. Hello.
Hi. All right, let me close out of that because there's too many windows open here for me. Hi, everyone. Marian here with Etcher. Let us know if you can hear me and see me and Kaitlin okay in the chat here. I'll write in the chat so that you know I'm a real person. Hello from snow-covered Austin, Texas. Hello, Nicole. Yeah, I'm in Utah and we are getting tons of snow, but that's like normal over here. So hope you all are doing okay over there in Texas. All right, I'm just looking through the chat here. Oh, you guys are active. There's already so much going on in the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Cherry. All good. Okay, Rochelle. Thank you, Rochelle. All good. We can hear. Llama. Thank you, Kitty. Yes, hi. Okay, great. All right, looks like we're good. Okay, so again, I'm Marian. Some of you may have seen me before. Today we have the wonderful Kaitlin Hoyt here today for our live demonstration. If you have any questions at all for Kaitlin throughout the demonstration, please all caps the word question in the chat and type in your question here so that I can see them clearly and I will ask them to Kaitlin through appropriate times during her demonstration. We do these free online demos every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday. So subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications to stay up to date, be alerted when we go live. Our next one is with Tina Hotchkiss on the 19th of February, Dynamic Animal Portraits in Ink and Watercolor. So we're in an animal kick apparently today, or this week, doing all things animals, which is awesome. So share this link of this demonstration with your artist friends so you can have as many people join us as possible. This is already really exciting. We already have over 100 people watching. This is just great. And of course, we have our feedback form here that we would appreciate you filling out if you can. It just takes a couple of minutes. If you got the time, let me and Kaitlin know how we're doing, let Etcher know how we're doing, and letting us know what we can do to improve our mini workshops and demonstrations in the future. And then let's see, Kaitlin has a podcast interview that she did a little bit ago. I believe that was uploaded recently. So if you haven't already gotten a chance to check out Kaitlin's interview based off of this demonstration, please check that out. It's really awesome and get a little bit more on insight on Kaitlin's love for art and nature and how she combines the two. Really great stuff there. And then I believe that's about it. We'll talk more about the mini workshop and other stuff as we get further into the demonstration. So please stick around for the hour if you're able to. Let's see. Oh, hi, Danny. Yeah, no worries. That's an okay question. So I'll ask this to Danny, and she can let you know what supplies she's using. So Kaitlin, Danny's asking what other supplies should they be getting so that they can follow along with you today?
Yeah, any kind of paper or pencil is fine with me. I'm personally using the Strathmore 4B, but any kind of pencil. And I have the kneaded eraser here. And this one's good for like lightly erasing lines, but not completely getting rid of them. And then just like a standard hard eraser to actually get rid of everything in case we make any boo-boos today.
Yeah, so we do have a reference photo that we're using today. So I'll put that in the link here. It is in the description of our video. If you want to grab it from there too, let me know if this link doesn't work for some reason. But I imagine we'll be following along closely to this reference photo. Does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
There should be two. I think there's a deer and then there's a bird later on. Is that right?
Open it up and find out here. Give me a second. Oh yeah, I see two. Yep.
Okay.
So, yeah, just I guess let them know which ones you're going to go with today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be starting with the deer. So.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So it's just very simple today, Danny. Just any kind of paper that you have. She's not using an Etcher sketchbook either. Just any kind of sketchbook, pencil and eraser, and then one of these images from the reference link right there. Okay. All right. So Kaitlin, why don't you go ahead and take us on from here? What are we doing today? How are we approaching this?
Sure. So today we've got a lot of different things to cover. Basically, I want to start with breaking down the basic animal anatomy. And this is going to be like a very generalized form-based thing. So we're going to be looking at like the different shapes that make up most animals, most four-legged animals. And once we do that, we're going to be looking at how to translate what we see in our reference photo and put it onto paper. And then finally, we're going to be looking how to infuse kind of like a stylized dynamic line work to bring that drawing to something that is more than the reference photo. We're adding a little bit of our own spin to it. So yeah, lots to go through. So I'm super excited.
That's great. I'm just kind of filling in the chat here. Yeah, so again, any questions in the chat about the process at any point, just ask them in the chat and I'll ask them to Kaitlin.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Just one second. My neighbors are being super noisy. So
okay.
I just got to close my door here.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, Ellen, this demonstration will be available as a replay. So if you're subscribed, you can be notified on all the new videos and as well as watch all the replays from previous live demonstrations, including this one.
All dealt with. We're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, we got all kinds of noise going on today.
So should I just begin? Just jump into it?
Jump into it. Let's start.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining me today. I'm super excited to have you. Yeah, like I said, a lot to go through. So I'm going to be kind of quick and going to be very general with a lot of the things that I'm saying. But hopefully it's still helpful to you. And yeah, and like she said, just any questions, ask away, and then I can pause and kind of elaborate if there's something that's confusing. Mm-hmm. So for the animal structure, for most four-legged mammals, they have these three basic shapes, or I guess four basic shapes, sorry. So we've got a box for the head. And then we have this tombstone shape. And I'll elaborate on this in a second because it is kind of a different shape. And there is a bit of perspective that goes into this, and that's obviously one of your fundamentals. So that's something I would recommend getting familiar with eventually, but it's very basic here in what we're doing, so I'm not going to go into it too much. So this is our tombstone shape, and by tombstone, I mean it's rounded at the top and then flat at the bottom like this. And it's three-dimensional, so it does have like another plane to it. So we're going to picture that as our animal's shoulder girdle. And it's tilting outwards like this. Mm-hmm. And then the torso is a cylinder. So that, and then again, notice that the tombstone is tilting away from the cylinder. I'll elaborate on this a little bit more later. And then we've got a box for the pelvis. So already you can kind of get the impression that this is, it's a three-dimensional animal. In a very general sense, it could be a horse, it could be a dog, it could be a cat. Mm-hmm. And it goes for rodents too. They have the same four shapes, but they're a little bit different. They're a little bit more compressed. So it's going to be more suited for something like what I'd mentioned. So yeah, so here we've got our four shapes. Tombstone here for the shoulder girdle. Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna fix this a little bit. It's tricky when you're first starting out and you're not familiar with perspective to like get these to all make sense. But that's why we're going to be using a reference photo, and that's going to be hugely supplemental for what we're doing. So basically right now, this is going to help us like understand anatomy enough that we can look at a reference photo and have a general understanding of what's going on. So we're not quite so overwhelmed. So our tombstone, okay. So at this point, we have the neck, And we're gonna take that around, and that actually goes to the center of our little tombstone shape here. So this point, what's so significant about the tombstone is that these 2 points at the bottom, this plane, I'm just going to darken that so you can see that it's a flat plane. You'll see this really distinctly in animals like horses or big cats. They have this flat bit right here, and this is where their shoulders come up. And it might seem a little bit confusing right now, but once we look at the reference photos and I kind of compare it, I think you'll get a better idea. So this is where the points of the shoulder blades would sit. And then at this point, towards the bottom of this flat plane here, this is where our arm is going to start. So with the arm, you want to think of it and think of all of this anatomy in relation to human anatomy. So we have our, excuse me, we have our own shoulders, and then we have our own upper arm. And in animals, the upper arm is usually quite shorter compared to the forearm. So that swings back. And this is often the part that gets left behind because in fluffier animals, it's hidden by the fur all the time. But it's super important to remember that there is an upper part of the arm. And then it curves down like this. And this is our upper arm. And then right here would be the wrist. So we want to try and think about where this would sit on the other side of this tombstone shape. So using our imaginative capabilities, our understanding of perspective, we are going to throw that in on the other side. It doesn't have to be exact. We're just getting, like I said, a rough idea here. And yeah, and then these are our wrists. So let's say we're drawing a dog. I'll just draw some really basic paws. And you want to keep in mind that the way animals stand, it's almost like they are on their tippy toes. So if this would be their wrist, the human wrist, then they're kind of like pressing onto it like that. So there is like a really nice curvature that happens. So that's our front. And then for the pelvis, again, you want to think of the joint kind of towards the bottom of the shape. And then it curves inwards and then outwards and then down again. So it's got this really funky lightning bolt shape. And that's because it's like a spring. And you want to think of all animals, they have this this spring-like feel to their body. And that's why you want to draw their bones with that beautiful curvature, because they're ready to run, right? They're ready to chase or be chased. So we want to keep that in mind in their anatomy. Form follows function always. So again, at the other end, we're going to imagine the other plane that is behind this. And then we're going to sketch in that other leg. And yeah, and that's the basic skeleton. Obviously, this is a very generic form that could be any animal. And the main things that change between different animals is either the proportion of these different forms in relation to one another, or the placement of them. So we've got our cylindrical shape, and it's really helpful too if you kind of think of it with a cross contour, if that helps you kind of visualize the form better. Just clean this up. I tend to be quite messy when I sketch initially, so hopefully it's readable enough. All right, so yeah, so that's basic. And then obviously with the face, it really depends on what kind of animal it is. That's kind of where you'll find the most variance.
Yeah.
So let's say we've got, say it's like a wolf, just super rough. That's kind of how it will fit. And then the neck curves around and again, like sits in this area. And the reason why we've chosen a tombstone shape instead of another box like the pelvis is because the tombstone shape, it's a little bit more appropriate, I guess, because there's so many muscles that sit up in the haunch region. Oftentimes it gets kind of lumped into kind of a round shape. So it's You could absolutely use like a box if that's more helpful for you for like perspective and getting a sense of the form, but I like this tombstone shape myself.
Yeah.
So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think it was so thorough. It was like boom, 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 boom. And
I'm glad. Yeah, it can be really daunting when you're unfamiliar with drawing and like, how do I know where to start drawing? There's so many different features and then perspective, but once you get an understanding of these basic forms, then it really does help all of you. So I could like flesh this out more and add muscles, but we've got a lot to go through. So I think we should probably move on to how to apply this to our reference photo.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, so we got some really nice comments here from you, from other people. Very nice explanations. It all makes sense.
Awesome.
So we're doing
awesome.
Yeah, so we're about 17 minutes in, everybody. So we'll go ahead and get your reference photo if you would like to kind of follow along and see how Kaitlin is applying all of that. Cool.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, our first image is going to be the deer. I've chosen the deer because it's the most supplementary to what I just taught you about those different forms. And then later on, the bird is obviously kind of an exception to that. And I'll go into more detail with that later. So, all right, so our deer. When we're looking at our reference photo, it can be very overwhelming. Where do we start? So for me, I like to have, I guess, a few different tips in my arsenal, depending on what kind of reference photo I'm looking at, like how dynamic this pose is, or yeah, just if there's certain pinpoints or something like that, then I'll tend to start with that. So with this one, I noticed that there is a curve in the spine, and I'm going to consider that our line of action. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term line of action, it's basically if you could only use one line to draw this whole animal, then what would it be? So for me, when I look at this reference photo, I see that kind of downwards curve. And this isn't going to be accurate. This isn't going to give us obviously any amount of detail, but the point is it gives us a reference point. This gives us that kind of energy that we want to maintain in our drawing. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start at the back here. And like I said, I'll probably be drawing all the way through this line here. This isn't necessarily the spine. So don't get confused with that. I know that's something that I struggled with when I first started with the line of action, was thinking that it meant the spine all the time, but it definitely doesn't. So we are working with the back, and we can see, I don't know, I wish I could point to the reference photo more, but there's definitely like a squareness happening in the back. I don't know if you guys can pick up on that. And we actually see the top of that plane that we just talked about. So we're going to keep that in mind. And I'm actually going to try and keep this light so that I can go over with the details later here. So let me just soften this up with my kneaded eraser. I'm very heavy-handed. It's a blessing and a curse. Plus, I love this 4B pencil because it really does let you get some really expressive marks, but that's not what we're going for yet. We're going to save that. All right, so we've got our box. And then we've got the spine. I'm looking at the contours of the body now when I'm referencing this spine. So I'm going up and then coming back around like this. So this is our cylindrical shape. This is our torso. And I'm just going to kind of imagine that it's three-dimensional like this. So again, I'm going to lighten this up. And then here is the top of our tombstone. And it does have a really pronounced shoulder girdle in this pose. So hopefully you can see where that neck is connecting in between. Okay. So then we have our neck. And here we have our box. All right, so that's our 4 main shapes, really general, and we're going to go over these, and then I'll show you how the muscles kind of lay over top and create the different shapes that we're going to be emphasizing. So based on this reference photo, we can see that the back leg is coming out like this, coming back, and then shooting down, just like we described, that kind of lightning bolt shape. And then we've got the forearm here. And then, let's see, I think I've got that a little bit too long. And then we come down to the hoof here. And then again, thinking about this as a 3-dimensional form, we're going to imagine this leg on the other side. Even though we don't necessarily see it up here, it's good to kind of keep in mind that it is, you know, it's a 3-dimensional form. We're not just thinking about it as the lines that trace the entire reference photo. We want to get a better understanding, and this is kind of a good place to start. So we this, and then can see that in the reference photo, this hoof is a little bit further ahead than this one. And then, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to. I was trying to find out a good place to ask, but people are wondering if you happen to have a printout of that reference photo so that we could see it next to your sketch, or maybe drawing on the reference photo too to indicate some of these lines.
I wish I did. I didn't think to do that, but let's see if I can adjust my camera to face the reference that I'm looking at, and then I can kind of point to it, see if that's helpful.
Yeah, maybe we'll try that for a little bit. If everyone is cool with that in the chat. It looks like they just really want to see how this is working with the
Yeah, and I wish I had thought of that beforehand, to be honest, but I didn't. Let's see, is that visible?
I'm not seeing it on the camera, no.
Okay, it would be on my face cam.
Oh, yeah, I would have to remove the spotlight too.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's see. Maybe I can move my laptop.
Okay, yeah, we can do our best with what we have here.
Yeah, we'll get creative.
Yeah.
All right, so here it is. So, all right, we're gonna MacGyver this. This is good. This is fine. So we can see here that there is kind of a flat plane up top, and then it comes down. You can see a little bit of a shadow between where the pelvis box and the cylindrical torso meet. So that's where we're going to have the end of our box. And for this bottom plane, it cuts off right about here, and it cuts off like before the bottom of the cylinder. So we have that, and then we've got this point here at the bottom of that box where the femur, the top of the thigh, kind of twists down and then comes back up. So yeah, for the shoulder girdle, it's you can see the kind of curve at the top of it here, and you see that sharp edge of the shoulder blade. That's going to be the bottom of our tombstone shape for our shoulder girdle. And then, of course, our neck fits in right between those two shapes here. I wish I could draw on my computer a little bit more deliberately, but hopefully you guys can get a better idea with that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And if you happen to use the reference photo, another reference photo in your mini workshop, we can just have you print it out beforehand.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of which, she is doing a mini workshop. So I'll just post the link here real quick and then talk about it here in a little bit after Kaitlin explains the rest of this.
Awesome. So yeah, so we've got like a basic foundation here. And this isn't, just to be clear, like this isn't necessarily how I start all of my drawings. At a certain point, you get to a point where you can see it underneath the forms, and then you can kind of work around it without drawing through the forms all the time. But when you're starting out, it's definitely a good practice to at least try and incorporate some of these shapes and be a little bit intentional about drawing through the forms, because it's really easy to get locked in just trying to essentially trace the outline of everything that we're seeing. And oftentimes that creates really stiff, stagnant drawings. So Yeah, we're going for something a little bit more structural here.
Right.
So let's see, we've got our back leg coming down right here. All right, so that's our basic form. I'm gonna lighten this up with my my kneaded eraser. And then we are going to go into the details. In retrospect, it probably should have used maybe like a lighter pencil, and so it would lift even easier, but we're gonna make the most of this.
Like a 2B, you say, or?
Yeah, like a 2B, something like that. Anything, yeah, a 2B would be great, actually.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully that's still visible. Actually, this is kind of helpful for us because I still want you to see the forms underneath, so.
Yeah.
All right, so at this point, when I'm looking at a reference photo and I have this basic structure in my mind, I choose a point to start. And this point will serve as the reference point for everything else, because the most important thing you want to keep in mind when you're drawing from a reference is the relationships between everything that you're seeing. Every line that's on that photo, you want to be able to look at it and see where it is in relation to the line closest to it. So we can see that the top of the pelvis is here. It's that flat line where we had that box. And then it's going to scoop around. And then again, see, we're deviating from this bone here because there's muscles, there's ligaments. There's a lot of details that we're not including with our basic foundation, and that's okay. That's something that takes a lot of time to learn and understand. But just this basic understanding is good enough for now. All right, so we can tell that the leg is coming up like this. And another good tip that I always tend to gravitate towards is when I create lines, a lot of the time I use kind of like a stiff kind of geometric shape. So I'm making everything more angular necessarily than it is. And I find it's easier to reference all the other lines when I'm using straight lines rather than curves, just because it's just kind of easier on my head personally. If that's over complicating it for you, then follow the reference photo and use those curvy lines if that's more helpful. But I like to keep it pretty angular just at the beginning to also kind of build on that like structural feel. So all right, so we've got our hoof here and curve it up like this. So when we're drawing too, we do want to keep in mind the curvature. Like we rarely want to draw the bones as like completely straight. There is often a bit of a curve to them. That kind of contradicts what I just said, but you want to think of it as a straight line, but with a little slight curve to it to give more energy, especially in the legs, like I said, where there are these springs. Right. Does that make sense? Is that complicated?
I think so. I mean, I was actually like thinking of like just regular gesture, like life drawing from the human figure. There's correlation there, with like C lines, S lines, straight lines, and of course, like the variety of all of those in your drawing too.
Exactly, and like human anatomy is actually so helpful when you're learning to draw animals too. That's actually how I started. Just because there's so many similarities, and once you kind of pick up on the similarities, it makes all animals a little bit easier. So if you want to take the long way around, I would recommend maybe starting with human anatomy. All right, so we're moving on to the back now. So again, looking for the lines, I see a relatively straight line here, and then it curves down and then meets the top of our tombstone shape. So obviously this lump up here isn't true to our cylinder, and that's fine. All of these shapes, they're not necessarily going to be perfectly replicated because the figure is, it's a little bit more gummy. Like it can move into different shapes and based on its position, based on how it's moving. So don't feel like you need to completely restrict yourself to like fitting it within these. The reference photo should always, first and foremost, be like your reference point here. So we've got our to me. And we do like to keep the stomach pretty round like that, especially when we're drawing animals like deer and horses, ungulates, because that's kind of just the way they are. They've got these kind of pot bellies, which I love, and I think is such a fun thing. So I like to exaggerate that at all opportunity.
Yeah.
So here we go. This is, again, our tombstone shape at the shoulder. And I think I actually have it a little bit too long here, so I'm going to shorten that up. Trial and error is what we're all about here.
Yeah, but this is so cool. Like, I'm really just amazed with how these basic shapes and structures work in building a very convincing animal drawing. This is super cool.
Oh, I'm glad.
It really demystifies the whole process, because yeah, like you said in the beginning, it can be very overwhelming just trying to understand,
Yeah.
how to even like tackle this to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess I made a little bit error. I forgot the form. After emphasizing so much to not forget the form, I forgot the form. So we're adding that here now. And we're curving that back. And it's easy to kind of miss it in this reference photo because it's so short.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tucked into the rib cage. So let's see if this is a little bit more accurate.
Yeah, I mean, you're only human, Kaitlin. It's okay.
I'm only human. We're making it up as we go. All right, so this is the top of our form here, kind of like our little elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are going down to our wrist here. And then curving back. And then meeting the edge of that tombstone. Again, this is the shoulder blade. This is where it hits right at the bottom of that tombstone shape. Creates a really nice kind of plane for us to see the perspective of the animal. And from this, we've got, this would be equivalent to our hand right here, this long bit. On horses and ungulates, it's really exaggerated. So, and then the hoof would be considered their fingertips. So we're curving around like that. There's this, it's kind of complicated, but when you're drawing their legs, there's this really beautiful thing that happens with tapering. Mm-hmm. And it goes from thin to thick to thin, like this kind of, yeah, it's just this tapered shape. And it's just a play off of like all these ins and outs, which is a beautiful rhythm that you'll get a hang of the more you draw animals. You'll start to see it. Mm. But yeah, do what you can. If it looks straight and kind of stagnant to you right now, then just, trust that you'll figure that out eventually. So we've got a little bit of our chest here. So this is the shoulder, and then this is the chest that's coming through. And this you're going to see underneath the shoulder girdle. And then we've got our neck. And I think I've made the head maybe a little bit too big for the paper, so I might have to kind of fudge that a little bit and make it work. Again, this is trial and error.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any questions, or like, am I moving too fast for anybody, or?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I also think that like you have to be super thorough and comprehensive in your explanations. Like, I hate to interrupt you as you're building this together. So
interrupt away. Like I know it's a lot to take in. So like if I skim over something, then please, yeah, let me know.
Yeah, feel free to please drop some questions if you have them for Kaitlin at this point. I did have one comment, I guess. That I noticed your pencil is not very sharp, but you're still getting a good mileage out of it. So is this something like, in order to make really nice lines, do you often have to keep your pencil sharpened? Like, is there an etiquette that you utilize around your pencil?
No real etiquette, honestly. It goes down really fast because it is a soft pencil. Mm-hmm. So I'll sharpen it and it'll be dull because I'm also so heavy-handed. So that's maybe a personal fault, but I always do sharpen it once I go from this basic building phase into the detail phase, which is what we'll be doing next.
Okay.
So yeah, so sharpen it when you get to that point, but don't worry about it so much if it's kind of soft and smudgy at this point. We're just throwing down lines to kind of build the form and go from there.
Awesome.
So yeah.
I'm also super heavy-handed, so this is a good tip for me.
Yeah, it is a blessing and a curse. People will see what I'm doing, but it's not necessarily going to be clean.
Yeah.
Right. And another just a tip that I like to do is when I'm sketching animals with the legs really close to this, like close to each other or in the distance, I like to just kind of black them out. And it's maybe like a stylistic thing. You don't have to do that, but I think it looks visually interesting. We're not going to be going into shadows too much with this because it's more of a stylized design feel, but there's obviously a little bit more freedom where we're designing the drawing and it's not meant to be photorealistic.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've got that rhythm in that front leg. See, now this one's kind of confusing. Maybe I shouldn't have drawn it there. It has 5 legs. Surprise. It's a mutant deer.
Yeah, it's a magic deer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We got a couple of comments here, though. Oh, this is lovely. Kitty says, I am so happy right now. I've never been able to draw a realistic looking animal before, and it's coming out so well.
Oh, I'm so happy. Yay.
Right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's such a great comment, Kitty. We're really glad that this is really working out for you. I think Kaitlin is just really good at explaining this. Like this is probably the easiest I've been able to understand when it comes to animal drawing. So,
oh, that's so sweet. Thank you.
Honestly, oh, there's my cat. She agrees. Yes, and my cat is here joining us today. If you happen to hear her, apologies.
Oh, hello. Welcome, cat.
Welcome, cat. Yeah. Okay. And then we have an interesting question here, though. Are there any standard measurements that we can follow for proportions, like the length of the legs or neck?
There definitely is. I wouldn't say it's standard though. It kind of depends so much on what kind of animal it is that you're drawing. So I don't want to throw a number out there, but generally you will get a feel for it once you do it more often. Like I can't tell you how many head. Usually the standard measurement for drawing animals and people is the head size.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I couldn't tell you exactly how many head spaces that this is supposed to be, but it's just it's intuitive at this point. And again, a little bit of trial and error. Like if it feels too big, then I'll adjust it. But that's kind of why we start really light.
Yeah.
Usually start really light and really rough just to get us, okay, this feels right. And there is definitely a level of like what feels good, what even if it isn't necessarily true to the reference, like if it feels good, if it feels intuitive, then go with that. So maybe that's a little bit of an indirect answer, but there definitely is like standard measurements if you want to look that up, if that's helpful for you. It's never been helpful for me because I've never taken the time to like manually measure it out. I'm a lazy artist. I don't know.
Yeah. And what works for you. So I guess you won't know until you try and apply it and see if it does anything for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Priyanka is asking, my perfectionism is coming out. Can you go over the tapering of the legs again?
Sure. Yeah. So the legs, there's like this ebb and flow that happens with the legs here. So let's give it a side angle. So we've got here, let me do this on another page so it doesn't get confusing. So we've got our shoulder here. Be a shoulder blade. So this is going to be the side of our tombstone, but I'm just going to include the muscle of the shoulder right here. And then we come back. And so you want to keep in mind that the bone it curves forwards, which is maybe a little bit counterintuitive. You might think that it would curve backwards, but it curves forwards. And there's this back and forthness that happens where it goes forwards and then it comes backwards with the wrist and the fingers or hooves or whatever it is that you're drawing. So when the muscle, you want to keep this bone in mind, and you want to kind of reference it, but it's not going to be exact. Like this is a muscle thing that I'm not familiar with the names of the muscles necessarily, but it just, you kind of feel it out. So what helps me actually really, really, really helpful is when you're drawing the wrist, you want to think of it as like a monkey wrench. And this is where the joint is sitting. And then we've got our paw. Let's say it's a paw or a hoof. It doesn't matter. So there's this kind of bulging and then it tapers down. So it goes up and it tapers and it's just like it's a rhythm. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a constant rhythm that there is in the legs, which I find so beautiful. Is that helpful?
Yeah, Priyanka, let us know if that helps a little bit. What I'm hearing is that you want to think of the tapering as part of the rhythm of the structure of the animal.
Yeah.
And then kind of let your marks like follow along with that way. So let us know if that works. And Joanne has a question that's very similar here is, do you use the same shapes when you're changing the view of an animal? And I'm wondering shapes as in the tombstone shape, the cylindrical shape. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne, if that is what you're asking.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if he's maybe referring to just these tapering shapes in general, but for the tombstone, it really doesn't matter what kind of perspective. Like the whole purpose of those 3D forms is to give you a sense of how the animal is moving in space. So let's say we're looking at an animal from behind. We're like this. This would be the back plane of the box. And then this would be our cylinder. And then this is our shoulder girdle at the top. You can kind of see already how it gives us a sense of three-dimensionality. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, so there is like a definite layering thing that happens.
Yeah, and overlapping. I was just thinking the foreshortening and stuff in the different perspectives.
Yeah.
You'll probably need those kinds of shapes just to help you place it correctly and overlapping correctly.
Definitely. Yeah, because it can get really confusing when you're trying to foreshorten and you don't know like the foundational anatomy enough to know what's going on. So it kind of just looks very blobby, especially with really fluffy animals.
Yeah. It's like drawing hair or a beard on a person. It covers everything and you're just not sure where your structure is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
which is helpful when you don't know what's going on, so you can kind of make it up. But
right.
We want to know enough just so that we can make it up with a little bit more believability.
Yeah. Okay, so just real quick, we're about 45 minutes in right now in the demonstration. So I just want to go ahead and plug Kaitlin's mini workshop. I dropped a link a few times already in the chat. But yes, on March 3rd, Kaitlin will be doing a more in-depth mini workshop that goes for 90 minutes about the process of drawing and painting an animal. So if you take a look at the link that I sent you there, it'll give you more information. It will be 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and she'll go into further detail with drawing, but as well as painting in acrylic her bird. It looks like a bird illustration. Is that right, Kaitlin?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Okay, yeah. So she will go into birds. We may or may not go into birds today, but for the workshop, we'll definitely use a bird reference photo, and you'll be painting alongside with her as well. Kitty says, I don't even care if we get to the bird. This is just great.
I'm glad. I actually think that at this point, we can move on to the bird now, and then I'll use that as a kind of combination of bird reference drawing versus dynamic line work. So we can jump into that quickly, so everybody gets a little taste of that.
You're spoiling us, Kaitlin. This is fantastic.
No worries. I'm going to sharpen my pencil this time because we're a little dull, so bear with me. Beautiful. Look at that.
Nice sharp tip. Yes. So Danny, this is kind of a little bit related to what I was saying. So she will use acrylics in the mini workshop, but Danny is asking, do you use watercolors for your final pieces? And what kind of paper would you use? Knowing this isn't a etch or sketchbook, but if you have a preference for the surface, what would you use for a watercolor?
Yeah, I gouache, which is it's like an opaque watercolor. And yeah, when I use that, I typically use 100% cotton paper. Like the Etcher sketchbook is great for that. Something that can hold a little bit of water, but any kind of mixed media is great too, especially the way that I like to use gouache is more thick. So yeah, there is a little bit more kind of forgiveness if you're using paper that isn't necessarily cotton, but yeah, gouache is a whole other beast for sure. And I can go into that maybe with another workshop with you guys too at some point.
Sure. Oh, I'm sure we would love to have you come again.
All right, so I'm going to jump into the bird now, just really quickly. And a bird is generally faster just because it doesn't have those 4 distinct shapes.
Okay.
So let's see. For a bird, and this particular reference we're looking at is a chickadee. So hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with the tail and just kind of make like a rough line. And again, I'm referencing the lines in reference to one another. So like where this tail ends, I'm looking at where the tips of the wings hit it, and I'm drawing it there. So let's see here. Yeah, I could go into more detailed bird anatomy, but for the most part, they're just kind of like this. Like they've got like a round head and kind of like a teardrop shaped body. And then
that already looks like major cute, you know?
Yeah, birds are my favorite thing to draw because they're just so expressive.
It's so cute. Yeah, that's already convincing enough for me.
All right, so we're just going to throw in these lines really quickly so we can start getting into that fun line work here. Okay, so the chest bumps out. And again, I'm looking at like where does the top of the wing hit with where the head connects. Super important landmarks. And the more familiar you get with anatomy, you'll pick up on these really significant landmarks, and you'll be able to draw less and less details and still have it look convincing, which I mean is, yeah, I think of it as caricature. Like you're taking those major features and then kind of simplifying them. Okay, so drawing in the feathers and then the legs here. Bird feet are probably the most difficult thing to draw about birds.
Yeah.
That's a whole other class. Holy moly. I don't like the wings is one thing because there's so many details, but there's something really subtle about bird feet.
Yeah. So I agree. I feel like, yeah, it's kind of like when you're hiding feet or hands on people, you just kind of like
exactly.
And like, I don't want to deal with this right now.
Yeah. All right, and we got a little beak, and then let's see, throw our eye in right here. So something like the eye where there's a little bit less around it to reference. Like this looks really cartoony, what I've got right here. And with a bird, it's very easy to make it look very cartoony like that. And what I find is the biggest help is, again, these really key features. So you want to keep in mind the beak. It's coming into this shape. It's not just sitting on the outside. You want to have that look like it's sitting within the structure of that bird. So already we see that looks a little bit more realistic. And another key feature of birds is they have this little cheek line. And I don't know if you can see it in this reference photo. It's really subtle. And this is something that I like to exaggerate in all of my bird drawings just because it adds so much dimensionality to it. But that's their cheek. So it goes from the eye to like the corner of that beak, and bam, you've got a bird. All right. All right, does that look okay? Are we, any questions?
Yeah, no, this looks great. You just knocked that out in like a couple of minutes. That's amazing. That's the skill of a master at her craft there. Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions. Just kind of going back to the surface of paper that you use for your coloring. Danny was just wondering if you could if it's like hot press or cold press, you know, that you prefer for your gouache or for your acrylics.
I it kind of I like hot press most of the time just because it's easier for scanning. There's a little bit less paper detail, so it's good for prints and things like that. But otherwise, I don't have a preference. Like I do love the texture of a cold press paper. I think it's visually very pretty. That's the thing I would do maybe more for original paintings that I'm going to be selling as is rather than prints.
Okay.
So totally a matter of preference.
So, okay, but you've done both for like gouache and acrylic painting is using both hot press and cold press depending on.
Yeah, definitely. I've used both for sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so, there's another question?
I was looking to see if there's another one. I'm not seeing another question other than really great comments for you. I'll share a couple. Claire says, this is such an amazing demo with so many great tips on how to draw animals and birds. Kaitlin explains her technique so clearly. And then one says, I just search you out on Instagram and follow because this is amazing.
Oh, gosh.
Let's see. Oh, and then Danny here. Okay, she's asking, knowing that you said that you're kind of heavy-handed, for those of us who can't draw a perfect bird out of the gate like you, do you recommend using multiple grades like 4H for basic shapes? I'm guessing to start really light and then building it on dark lines later.
Yeah, you can. Generally, I just say go in right away with the heaviest one and kind of figure it out because there is a tendency to kind of noodle and be a little bit too tentative when you're starting out like that. And sometimes you just need to go in and make the mark, even if it's wrong. Just throw it down confidently, and that's going to reflect in the mark making. It's going to make it look more dynamic when you do that because you're not like chicken scratching every single line. You know, you're throwing that line down confidently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good tip. Hopefully that answers your question, Danny. Yeah. So we have 7-8 minutes left. We'll have Kaitlin wrap up here, and then maybe Kaitlin can show other examples of her work here if we got some time.
Okay. All right. I'll just really quickly throw in a little bit more tips here for the line work. What I like to do is I like to cross hatch around the forms. So if we're drawing a circle, we're going to think about those lines curving around the circle. That's not a great example there, but you get the idea. So yeah, keep that in mind. And I generally do that more than like a soft shading just because I like the look of that more. It adds a little bit more of a dynamic thing. And yeah, making sure that your shadows are deep. Like even if you have to go pure black in different regions, then definitely throw that in. Don't be afraid to go really heavy in certain areas because that's going to make sure your drawings don't look super tonal. Because that was a huge struggle of mine when I first started out, was very one similar tone drawings.
Yeah.
So let's see, one more tip. What have I got? Oh, for line weight. I always consider the light source coming from above when I'm drawing, even if it's different in the reference photo. Just kind of as a rule of thumb for me, it works. So I like to thicken and darken the lines that are away from the light. So like this I will darken, and then keep these lines up above kind of lighter to imply that there's light being kind of falling on the upper part of the bird here.
Yeah.
And that just kind of adds a little bit more depth and interest to your drawing. So yeah. So if there's any other questions, I'm sorry, I hate to go through that so fast, but I got a little bit caught up in the structural stuff, I guess.
Yeah, no, honestly, it was all super helpful. Like, I think you did great in just an hour, and I am really happy to have been your host here and to see you do this. And you get all the comments in the chat. If you have time, Kaitlin, to go through the chat later on your YouTube channel, they're all just wonderful comments for you. Yeah, so yeah, for those of you who are looking for her on Instagram, it's just her name, Kaitlin Hoyt. I'll write it down here in the chat. Follow her beautiful work on Instagram. And Claire has an interesting question for you on your workshop, Kaitlin. If Claire wants to use watercolors instead of acrylics for your workshop, would that be okay?
I'm sure it would be okay. It's a little bit of a different medium where
Yeah.
it's so transparent versus acrylic, but I think a lot of what I'm going to be talking about, I think it could translate. So yeah, if you don't have access to acrylics, then I'd say absolutely give it a go.
Okay. Yeah. So Claire, hopefully you'll still be able to join us for that. Let's see if there are any questions here. Wonderful tip about the light source. Thank you. Let's see if I can find any more questions. We have a few more minutes here, so if you'd like to ask Kaitlin anything, go ahead and drop it in the chat. And for Kaitlin, thank you for those tips on the bird. Do you have any other examples you want to show us just for a minute or two, or?
Oh, let's see what's in my old sketchbook. I don't even know what's in here.
It'd be a surprise for us all.
Here I got some dog drawings.
Ah, that's so gorgeous.
Thank you. Oh gosh. This is like my rough sketchbook. Here you can see that kind of tapering in the arms. I love that so much. I find that really fascinating.
Yeah.
What else have we got? Got bunny. This paper is awful. It's so thin that you can see all the drawings on the other side, so it looks really muddy, but yeah. Got some wolves.
Does the smudginess that sometimes happen with pencil not bother you, or do you just kind of accept it for what it is, or do you fix your drawings in any way, shape, or form, or?
No, usually not. I draw so much that it just kind of like I don't really care about them. Once they're out of me, I don't feel precious about them. So if they get smudged, if they get ruined, then it just kind of is what it is. But yeah, you absolutely could fix it, or maybe use a harder pencil. Like these soft pencils are really great for making expressive marks, but it's gonna smudge, like it, and which is great if you want that shading, maybe. But
yeah.
Got this cute frog guy. I think he's cute.
This is so cool. Thank you, Kaitlin.
Yeah.
This is great. Let me look here. There's got some stuff in the chat. Let's see. When is Christina, we're doing just the mini workshop on March 3rd. That's what's scheduled right now with Kaitlin. But if Kaitlin is feeling up for a 3-hour longer class, we can talk about that with her and get that scheduled maybe around after the mini workshop starts going. So if you would really like that, please fill out the feedback form and just let the Etcher team know that might be something that you would look really forward to. Is to have a couple of longer workshops with Kaitlin. I think it would be amazing. I already learned so much from her for just 1 hour. I think 3 hours with Kaitlin, you'll probably be like, you'll probably up level quite a bit. Fill out that feedback form if you get a chance, and just let us know that that's something that you're interested in. Kitty is asking, are we doing acrylic on canvas or on paper for your mini workshop?
Just on paper. Yeah, you definitely could use canvas if you have that kind of material like available to you, but yeah, just paper is fine.
Yeah, would that be watercolor paper? I'm looking at your thing here.
Yeah, I've used watercolor paper, but any kind of thick paper, like if you have cardstock too, then that's fine. Yeah, it's super flexible. Just make sure it's like a relatively thick paper and not like this really thin stuff.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, we got people signing up. Thank you, Reina, for that. I think I sang your name right. She just signed up for your demo or for your mini workshop.
Awesome.
Let's see. Vicky's asking if we can see your finished deer again from earlier.
Oh yes. Let's see. Right here. Yeah, you can see the drawings underneath it, but
yeah. Okay, we got some questions here on supplies, so we'll go through this really quick and then we'll wrap up here. Okay. Let's see. So acrylic gouache. So there's people asking about gouache versus acrylic gouache versus jelly gouache. So Kaitlin, right. Have you used all three, or do you have something to say over one over the other?
Yeah. I've been using jelly gouache a lot lately, and I mean, I just like it because I'm someone who, if I have an expensive art material, then I'm going to be really intimidated and not use it as much. So jelly gouache is kind of a student grade paint, so it's really good for things like quick studies and things like that. But I've recently got Holbein as well, which is like an artist's grade, and I enjoy that also. Acrylic gouache is good because it's like acrylic paint, but it just has like a matte finish to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of depends what you're going for. Like they're all very different. Yeah, they're all pretty different. Like the Holbein that I'm using is much more transparent even than the jelly gouache, but something like Winsor Newton is like a designer's gouache is going to be really matte, really velvety, and very opaque too. So they're all great. They're just different.
Yeah. Yeah. So whatever works for you the best. Patty has a good suggestion here on maybe using opaque watercolors or gouache so that it translates a little bit better with what you're using in acrylics for the mini workshop. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. We like a little bit of opacity with my technique. I don't really do well when I'm just working transparently. That's why watercolors and I don't necessarily get along. So I would definitely recommend gouache, or even if you just use your watercolor paints, but with a white gouache to kind of build, like mix into it to make it more opaque, then that's fine too.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good tip. Danny, I was going to go to your question, but she kind of answered it there. So hopefully that will answer your question. If you only have watercolor supplies, since Etcher has been mostly heavily with gouache and watercolors, yeah, try mixing white gouache with your watercolors to get a little bit of opacity in there. Or if you got a gouache palette, maybe try doing the workshop with gouache while she's demonstrating with the acrylics. And then maybe we can have Kaitlin come back again with specifically a gouache workshop. Let's see, will fluid acrylics be okay to use?
Yeah, I think that's what fluid acrylics is just kind of like a watery. Yeah, I use I think I use the fluid ones too. I use the Liquitex. I don't use the heavy body, that's for sure. So whatever one isn't heavy bodied, I mean, it really doesn't matter. As long as it creates something that's relatively opaque, then you're good to go. I wouldn't worry so much about the materials. A lot of it's going to be very kind of foundational like this. It doesn't matter so much about your materials. It's just a matter of comprehending what it is that I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I got through most of the major questions, got some people signing up. So this is really exciting. I'm not entirely sure who the host is for the mini workshop. Whoever it is, I'm sure they will take care of you the way I do here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. I'm just going to wrap up real quick. Since we don't want to go a little too much over time. So again, if some of you had done the live demo along with us today with Kaitlin, tag us on Facebook and Instagram when you post the art that you made, and maybe tag Kaitlin too. I'm sure she would love to see it. Yeah, hashtag Etcher Mini Workshop on Instagram, and you will be put in the drawing for a monthly US $50 for art voucher for Etcher supplies. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so that you will be notified when we'll go live again next. Again, one more time with the with the feedback form there, let us know if you would like to have Kaitlin come back for other workshops or a longer workshop, or what we can do to improve our general process, all of that good stuff. And then I'm going to drop the mini workshop link one more time. Some of you have already signed up, which is great. We're really looking forward to seeing you again and watching Kaitlin continue with her magic, but with paint now this time. All the details are in that link there. And I believe that's about it. I'm going through here one more time. Don't see any other things. So, okay, yeah. So thank you everybody for joining me and Kaitlin today on this Tuesday morning. If you're in the States, if you're elsewhere, thank you for spending some time with us here today. Yeah, go ahead and rewatch this if you missed it a little bit. I think the entire demonstration was wonderful, and Kaitlin was so thorough in her explanation. This will be really fun to watch over and over again. So yeah, so that's about it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining Etcher and Kaitlin here today. We'll see you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Kaitlin, for joining us. This was good. This was just so great.
Awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Okay.